Alvin?
Yeah.
We're live. Yes.
Okay, we're gonna start a sound test. So I just say a few words. I'll be on the hallway listening.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Is Ann watching?
Well, maybe not. I'll send him the link actually.
Okay.
To the state fair, so you can remotely stream it.
Well, good to be here. Hot outside, I'm glad the air is early.
Okay, nice questions to this. Who was hoping to?
Okay, looks good. We're good.
We do share a lot of I thought we were supposed to start at 12:45.
They'll give them some CPT.
Oh, okay.
Let's go to Urban Dictionary Entry. Not already.
Something that's messed up, cheap, crappy, broken, not up to its standards. Whoa, now that was janky, dude.
Word.
Yeah, shit, I know.
Hi there, how are you doing? Please make sure you sign in, if you would, please. Sorry if I'm late. You can go see. There it is.
Again, it's already saying, I'll probably go through the rest, but I can listen out.
Okay, where there are a few, there are many or something, right? So appreciate all that are here. We do have a great program set up. If you're a panelist, if you would please sit right there where those little red deals are. And I want to encourage everyone to just sit in the circle there. So if you'll come out from the desk and just get a little closer. And eventually I'll probably just come on over there too. So. So welcome to the NAACP and the People Shall Lead workshop. It's entitled The Intersectionality of Environmental Climate Justice and NAACP Game Changers. And again, my name is Denise Abdul-Rahman, and I serve as the chair and today's facilitator. I want to take one moment before we actually start and just do a little recognition of the 1-year anniversary of Indianapolis Power and Light announcement to stop burning coal. So, I'm just going to Oh, also, please make sure you get a handout over here of today's agenda. We have a happy retirement card that we'd like you all to sign to IPL. Thank you, Ben, for announcing it. And if you would please come and just get a little bubbly and sparkling white grape juice, and we will toast to the announcement. Please come and get one. Appreciate it. Please come up and grab one, don't be shy. Yes, please take pictures so we can let IPL see how happy we are and the governor on this announcement. And if everyone, you can go to your seats and we'll all kind of cheer. Please come get one. It's this sparkling grape juice. You'll be fine. Young people. Please help yourself. Whatever makes you comfortable. And there's a card. We will circle it around. Yes. Okay, so we're here to IPL and to the Clean Power Plant, stop burning coal here and now, 2016 and beyond. Thank you. Hear, hear. Hear, 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 hear. And we have a card, special card coming to you, IPL, saying happy retirement. Staying awake at work is now in the past. Coal-fired power plant. Retirement's here at long last. Happy retirement, coal-fired power plant. Here, here. Thank you for indulging me in That's celebratory, symbolic. Okay, so now we can shift the gears and we kind of want to commemorate Hurricane Katrina, which occurred 10 years ago. And so I want to start with a brief video.
The sky, too, is everyone's sewer. It's the great airlift. Thousands of tons of daily rubbish on a free ride.
Okay, we live in that fell, equate on myself. There's the world standing, we polluting up the air. You sleep, but they can't stay here. So why you still here? You need to treat it like you care. Clean up in the air. Yeah, clean it up in the air till you clean up in the air. Treat it like you can. Yeah, clean it up in the air till you clean up in the air.
I'm clean up in the air, pollution can't faze me. Get up off your couch and stop being lazy. Don't you hear the earth screaming out, save me. You need to go green, ain't no maybe. Equator on tilt, I just hope it don't fall. I'm trying to reduce this carbon, I don't know about y'all. Do your part to help, whether it's big or small, and you can make an impact from eating the same car. We got these little baby crying and these old people dying, they just burning fossil fuels, they ain't trying. When they know alternative is what we supplying, yeah. And you can call us the green team, cause we ain't use a call, you know we use a we junior ego activists with a dream. Hurry up, let's say the earth. I'm here to start the screen.
Living that fell, equate on myself. There's the world standing, we polluting up the air. Folks leave, but they can't stay here. So why you still here? You need to treat it like you care. Clean up in the air. Yeah, clean it up in the air till you clean up in the air. Treat it like you care. Yeah, clean it up in the air till you clean up in the air. Okay. As a whistle, blowing much pollution. I'm going mad green like.
Okay, well, we get the gist. Young people involved, sharing their narrative of how they want their environment to be clean. And now I want to try to do the commemoration real quick. All of these are short videos.
The air that we breathe must be all nasty. I got my back against the wall, but the wall trashing. And I tell it how it is. You won't hurt me. Depend on me for what you call worthy. Even the law dirty. I seen the hot litter outside the hospital. It couldn't have got sicker. The water run orange out the faucet. We the real reason, and we still drink it, but we will need it, even though we damaged. Lost in the galaxy, I'm just frustrated. It's the great team come up on the bandwagon, but they can't catch up like they been sagging. Yeah, we need y'all help, but if you choose to lose, we bring it out. Rain's real hard, real long time.
Thank goodness for KI NuMedia. Commemorating Hurricane Katrina. And while this is playing, if you want, we have a whole capsule that you can write a message and put it
What
in
is
the red
up and
box.
down, yeah, it's the winner's check. I'll go in from the north and start to rain real hard, to rain real long time.
6 feet of water in the streets of the major land. River rolls all day, river rolls all night. Some people got lost in the flood. Some people got away all right. River has busted, tear down black and white. 6 feet of water in the streets of the major land. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. President Cruz come down, railroad train. The little black man with no man in his head. President say, oh, black man, you need to stay. But the river has the best poor crackers land. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away.
Okay, so that's kind of our commemoration, and we have again a hope capsule. You can write a note of what you hope for the survivors, and then I'm going to play one other small little video that tells us what can we maybe consider doing, and then we'll listen to our community here in Indiana and start to think about how we can try to basically stop climate change and disasters like what occurred in New Orleans. And this is called the next project.
Society, civilizations, in some sense, are like our bodies. If there's something systemically wrong, it's manifesting all over the place, in all our organs, and that seems to be what's going on in our world.
The system is failing all around us.
Our infrastructure is falling apart. Our jails are full and can't hold more people. Our young people are burdened with $1 trillion in student debt. We're in deep trouble.
When the temperature of the earth is starting to rise, that's a very bad sign. Our earth is running fever. And it's running it because it's sick in many ways.
In a country like the United States, the fact that anywhere from 45 to 50 million people are hungry, this is a problem.
We can't go on like this. We can't keep moving toward climate catastrophe, nuclear war, persistence of inequality, poverty, famine.
There is a systems problem. These are not one-off issues. They are interconnected, and we have to look at the system as a whole.
It's time to talk about alternatives. It's time to talk about what's next.
We need to be aspirational and be clear about the vision of the world that we want.
What is the system that humanizes us? What is the system that opens up our imagination and possibilities of cooperation?
Nothing is more important right now than to discuss how can we bring about this change.
As systems fail, individual and community creativity explodes, and that's what we have seen. People in this country are solving the problems themselves. They're coming up with new models and strategies. And within those models and strategies are the kernels of a systemic way to move forward.
Land trusts,
cooperatively owned businesses,
sustainable energy,
state-owned banks,
urban gardening, urban farming.
These small successes taken together are a proof of concept that this can happen on a larger scale.
We're compelled to search for alternatives, not just analytically, but in how we live and what we do, how we organize our daily lives. And that has tremendous potential.
Our actions and our imagination have to match the magnitude of this problem.
We have to get out of our comfort zone. We must think with courage.
All bets are off in terms of our previous thinking. Our ways of thinking about the economy, our ways of thinking about politics have proven an abject and utter failure. Good news is we have no choice but to adopt revolutionary thinking. I like that.
That's the exciting part about this moment. When there are no rules, then people have freedom to invent and to create new things.
I have no doubt that we can create a better future.
If people who cared about these things really joined together to do something, anything is possible.
The biggest worry for me is that we don't try, is that we don't push for what we know is right, for what we know is possible.
It's time for everybody who cares about this country and the future of the planet to do something about it, to get involved.
We can actually do better. We can build a better system. It's not impossible. It's a very American thing to do, to build a new system.
It's a challenge. We can do it collectively, neighborhood by neighborhood, step by step.
I think that the world that we're on the verge of is bright and beautiful and interesting, complex, local, interconnected. I hope we get there.
It's time to talk about what's next.
So let's talk about what's
Please come and
next.
sign our statement at thenextsystem.org.
Okay, we need to like someone that's helpful. Appreciate it. Okay, so now we get to talk about what's next, and as you heard them say, neighborhood by neighborhood, right? So let's start with our Indiana neighborhood and representatives from our community. If we could have Ms. Leona Chandler, please, panelists. And Ms. Chandler, her bio information is in the packet, but she is the Indiana Environmental Climate Justice Chair of the NAACP, and she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminology at IU and a Master's in Social Work. Thank you, Leona. Next, we have Rita join as our roundtable panelist. Rita is a member of the NAACP of Indianapolis, and Rita is a former special agent involved in investigation fraud. But Rita and Leona both were instrumental in helping to advocate and oppose House Bill 1320 this past session. If we could please give Rita. Next, we have Wise Logic of Cooper Institute. Wise is a community educator, activist, and independent scholar. And he has been with Cooper Institute for 7 years, giving various perspectives and analysis. If we could please give Wise. And joining the panel now or later will be Attorney Brian Bullock, who will give us a summation of, some of the next steps. And Attorney Brian Bullock, as many of you know, has a very extensive background. He has spoken at several venues, including the prestigious Kroc Institute for International Peace at the University of Notre Dame, He's been with the National Coalition of Puerto Rican Women Conference, Indiana University Northwest for Environmental Justice and Human Rights Conference, and many, many more. And if you need any legal services, Attorney Brian Lewis is just moments away. Okay, so we have just some basic questions that we are proposing to the panelists. And if one thing I want to emphasize is that this is through what I consider our narrative. And we can define what our is. Something that I've recently learned in my travels is that there should not really be any allies. Our is all of us, that we all consider ourselves human beings, and that we all want the elimination of racism and we want a just society. Then it's all of our narratives, whether you're considered the frontline community or whether you're someone of privileged backgrounds. But we're going to be sharing through our narratives, each of the panelists. So I'm asking each of the panelists to share from their own lens. Question number one. And I guess you can start from left to right if you want. Please speak to your activism within the context of the NAACP 5 game changers. And those game changers are health, education, economics, criminal justice, and political civic engagement.
It's good to be here. I want to say that. I started off at Kepler Institute about 2007, just wanting to get involved with more of the community engagement or civic engagement. Wanted to be a part of the solution that was going on in the community, especially dealing with education. I got with Kepler Institute. I found out that they were doing a lot of great things. You know, they had a great story going around in the city. Everybody in the world. So therefore, I found a place where I can like vent, a place where I can come, and kind of like exercise my ideas, my theories that I had on education, and not just that social activism. Probably like 3 or 4 years after that, I started to become a teacher at KI Community School. From there, I got into other initiatives with KI, their aquaponics, their NuMedia, as you see here today. I became a lot more sound as far as the other side of environmental justice, which was, pollution of the air, water contamination, Earth's land masses, resources, deforestation. But I was already aware of environmental justice of a different source, where young brothers were being constantly harassed, violently assaulted across the United States. Lack of economic opportunities, lack of economic development, poor education. So I was aware of environmental justice, social justice on one end. I wanted to see how they all were connected and bridged together. So through KI, I was able to do that. I also worked with here in the city, the YMCA. I was a site director for 4 years, working with communities to build better relationships with a lot of those communities and try to, build other alternatives to education. I also taught pre-K and kindergarten here in Indianapolis and Evansville for 4 or 5 years. I thought, that was a really, really good stage for kids as they develop. They're very impressionable. At that stage, I felt like they need good, strong role models in their lives so they can see that, there are possibilities and all alternatives besides the environment that tells them the counter to that. So that's how I got involved with, my initiative towards education, towards social activism. Just wanted to be a very conscientious individual and aware of the conditions that I find my community and I find my environments around me. So that's how I got it.
Thank you. And I just want to interrupt real briefly. I'd like to acknowledge that President Bowling Williams of the Indiana NAACP is here with us. And thank you for joining us. I I know you're very busy between both workshops, so I didn't know, did you want to share a few words or?
Well, I don't want to delay you anymore, but this is such a critical area that I am so glad that NAACP moved into, and I am just so blessed that we were able to find Denise Rodman, Abdul Rodman here in the state of Indiana. She's still training and teaching me, and that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, President Bowman. Okay, next we have Leona Chandler.
Hello, everybody. I am very glad to be here and a bit nervous too. But I come to you from the NAACP in Gary. And my community is at a point where we are in desperate, dire needs of a lot of things. I became involved with the environmental climate justice portion of the NAACP maybe about a year ago, and I'm still learning. There's a lot of things to learn and know, but from my standpoint, the city is, we had Lake Sandy Joe, which was a lake that they would bring all types of toxins and stuff and put in that area. They wanted to do a survey. A group came in. I can't remember the name of that group. They came in. They wanted to do. I'm sorry.
Hoosier Environmental.
I'm sorry. That's right. The Hoosier Environmental Council wanted to come in and do a survey to find out where we were at, where to try to get money to try to do some things better for the community, and I became catapulted into wanting to help some kind of way, because I started to try to connect the dots, so to speak. The Lake Sandy Joe, the dump that was in our area, and with some relatives of mine that had passed away unexpectedly. And we believe that had to do something with that situation, with how the toxins and the meal and the whole 9 yards of what's going on in the Gary area. So that was what brought me to be involved with this program, this portion of the NAACP, so that I can learn more and help my community in whatever way I can.
Thank you.
I've just been a member of the NAACP for a few years, and I hate to say that my membership was initiated by a movie, Fruitvale Station. When I saw that movie, I had a passion for civil rights, and I joined the NAACP. I met Denise, and my actual activism with regard to game changers is twofold. One being of course, environmental justice. If you will, allow me to associate that with health, given that it's related. When you look at right here in Indianapolis and the coal industry, and what coal does to people's health, and also in South Bend, my hometown, we had an ethanol plant there in the early 80s. You could smell it all over town. And of course, EPA had been in and everything was done. Ethanol, it's gas that's actually made from corn. Corn that's makes grain alcohol, it's got gas, we have reflection. But there was a cancer cluster that was very personal to me. My mother passed from cancer, several friends that I knew personally and intimately. And to me, that was odd. It was an anomaly to know so many people that died from cancer in such a close area. And so, you want to blame somebody. So, I started doing some research on the ethanol plant and realized that one of the things that's produced in the production of ethanol is benzene, which is known as carcinogenic. So, thus my interest in environmental justice, and of course, directly relates to health, one of the game changers. My other activism relates to civic engagement. I participate in voter registration, and I also educate people on the necessity of voting. And I also have to say that I was very proud when my grandson turned 18 and he had a chance to vote for the first time for the first Black African American president. So that's been my activism in the game changer.
Thank you. So next question we're going to ask, how do you think money, economics, and power influence politics? Really?
Oh boy, you know, what comes to mind is a TV series called The Haves and the Have-Nots. And that needs no definition. But I would like to define capitalism, which money, power, economics, politics equates capitalism. Capitalism is an economic system where there's investment in and ownership of the means of production and distribution in exchange of wealth, done mainly by private individuals and maintained by private individuals and corporations. Now, to give you a couple of examples of how politics, money, and power and economics are influenced by politics, or I'm sorry, how money, power, economics can be influenced by politics. The legislative hearing that Leona, I and Denise, we attended on a bill that had to do with taking the meat out of solar power. And by that, the meat, what I mean is that they wanted to eliminate net metering, which is if you have a rooftop solar powered energy source and you create more energy than you need, then the electric company will credit your bill for that energy, excess energy. That's what net metering means. Well, they wanted to eliminate that, and they also wanted to propose fees and taxes, which of course would take the whole initiative out of me owning a rooftop solar powered energy source. Well, Representative Eric Cook, who is the chairman of the House and Committee on Energy, also has investments and financial interests in oil and gas. Duke Energy provided over $39,000 in campaign funds to help Representative Cook get elected. Okay, so now you've got a corporation, which is a power source, money source. You've got a politician on the other side. Okay, you've got the exchange of wealth. He's got stocks, you know, money in gas and oil, Duke Energy. Well, you know, they're the company. And so you have your exchange of wealth as I define capitalism. You have production and distribution, or that's energy. Now, politics, what I don't understand, and I'm not really politically savvy, I don't understand how an individual who is a politician, who has a responsibility to public constituents, has stock in gas and oil and becomes the chairman of a committee which relates to utilities. How can that happen? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Okay, so then what does he do? He decides to author a bill that takes our emerging solar powered, clean energy, efficient energy, to take the meat out of it so that so it'll stall that emerging power source. Because everybody's got rooftop solar power, of course the stocks are gonna fall down, right? Because the electric company, they're not gonna sell as much electricity. So as I said, I'm not politically savvy, but I certainly don't understand how you can have a politician with those associations become the chairman of utilities initiative. So, good.
I'll say this here.
Hey, everything she said in a nutshell. I mean, because it's just like, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch your back type of situation. And that's not the way things should be run. Because everybody should have the opportunity to become wealthy if possible. Not one person be the conglomerate of everything else. You know, that's, in my mind, just totally, utterly wrong. But that's what happens. That's the world we live in today. But I guess my plight would be more so, I guess, kind of piggybacking on that. We have a situation in the city of Gary right now where it talks about the politics and the economy again. Is hitting home for me again. It's from my high school. My high school is Westside High School. I'm an alumni, so it's my president. But they're looking to close that school based on, because unfortunately, from what I understand, Gary, Indiana is the one city in the United States that has the most charter schools more charter schools than any other city in the United States. So all the high schools in Gary are closed with the exception of Westside. Westside happens to be entering their 6th year of this intervention, so to speak, to get their grade up to be better, which they have really done that. Their goal was to be at 90%. Their goal now is 92%. But I'm part of our alumni association that we're getting started to help save that school, because when you save Gary Westside High School, then that opens the door for other high schools to come back. In my mind, we really don't need about 2 more for the city because the population has come down so over the last years or 30 some odd years that I was in our school. So that's my plan.
Very good. Question?
Yes. Since we have several people here from Gary, I'm very interested in understanding something that was published in the Star last weekend, claiming that your mayor, Karen Freeman Wilson, is in concert with our dear governor, Mike Pence, in her opposition to the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan. Now, they reference something in here that I've yet to see the original source for, but I was just wondering, was that covered? Because it was an editorial in the Indianapolis Star.
If I could say 2 things. One, I thought it was related to the ozone and not the Clean Power Plan. And 2, we can have Attorney Brian Bullock address that in his summation, and he is also from Gary community. So, okay, thank you. Wise, if you could share, how do you think money, economics, power influence politics?
I just want to say I definitely seen it from the panel. But just a brief historical context, you know, money, power, and politics have always been associated. An example is in 1898 in the William McKinley election. You know, when against William Jennings Bryan, you had, J.P. Morgan, Carnegie, and Rockefeller, who all sat together and decided, this is a direct quote from Rockefeller, or I think Carnegie, let's just fire the president. That's an example. Then if you go years back, Hayes, his backyard dealings when he gave up on Reconstruction, pulled all of the federal troops out of the South, leaving blacks to fend for themselves, knowing the conditions that were very, right there with violence, Ku Klux Klan. You also had other coalitions that were out there to assault and terrorize blacks. So those are just remnants at the national level of how money, power, and politics work. But then Urban Laszlo had a book years ago called The Chaos Point, where he calls money, power, and politics the drivers of chaos. You talk about economic unsustainability, where you got the wealth gap. You know, you got groups like ALEC, you know, who are in cahoots with government officials, and they have these clandestine meetings in Georgia and other places around the city who establish policies that directly affect communities, and those communities don't have a say in this. That's money, power, and politics. But then you have the affluent who consume 80% of the Earth's energy and raw material resources, which they think nothing else about. We have it. It's ours. We want to capitalize it. And anybody else that wants it, we want to oust them out. We're going to find ways to oust them out. And then also we have the global financial system. I was reading a book by Matt Taibbi where he talked about there's only been one bank since the financial crisis that has been put on trial, but it was a very small bank compared to the global conglomerates of financial institutions who saw no court. Pay a fine, slap you on the wrist, don't do it again. But then Obama, and I don't want to blame him, but this is a part of the game. He puts those same people right back in the same position that they were in that happened. So money, power, and politics again. Then you got social unsustainabilities where you have a group of minority people who are clustered into one community, clustered into a neighborhood, knowing that they need economic development, knowing that we need areas where these people can work, they can afford healthy alternatives to food. AA closing. You know, you think about the AA closing here, you know, in the city, I mean, that's relevant because people no longer have access to food close to them. You know, I heard somebody argue that they didn't have healthy options, they were unhealthy. Well, hold on. Besides that, then why did nobody step up and hold AA accountable? Right. We could have got a hold of some farms, some local co-ops. We could have done things there to make sure that people in that community, and when I think about those people in those communities, a lot of those people are elders, are seniors. They have history there, there's context there. So now we're driving down, and I was telling this earlier, it's nice that you have vans and people that are there to pick them up and take them, but you're taking them out of their community, giving money to somebody else's community. That's gentrification. I don't care how you look at it. When I think about climate change, I don't think about climate change in context as money, power, politics. When I think about that, I think about that as the urban environment. You know, when you have a dilapidated public school infrastructure, there's no jobs. Lack of, there's no diversity when it comes to the jobs in your neighborhood. You know, so money, power, and politics. And then when I think about the ecological unsustainability, you know, what's going on in California? It's serious there. Right. You know, they're now telling people you can't use water here, but you can use water there. But then you have politicians over there who are trying to override it. They're trying to wiggle through legislation. Oh, well, I guess we can squeeze a little bit more water for us. So that's how money, power, and politics are always being connected. And they will remain always connected until we get a coalition of people willing to stand out there like, yo, we can't let this happen. We want to stop you. And I also think we need to consider creating our own initiative. Opposite from them, independent of them. So that's how money, power, and politics works.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to combine the last two questions together and ask each panelist to take about 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll start to have a summation of it all. It's going to give us all the answers. Attorney Brian will look where we go from here. What do you think we should do to be the change in our communities? And again, I guess it's kind of repeating it. How do you think all this is connected? Health, crime, economics, and everything. But if you just really want to answer, what do you think we should do to be the change in our communities? Leona.
I guess you saw my hand. I'm trying to. In a word, educate. To educate, education is how I have been taught that education is the key to everything. Because once I have it here, unless, God forbid, I have a nervous breakdown or something and I lose my mind, it's going to always be here. And I can always take what I know to help somebody else. That's my plight, that's my job. As a person, I feel, as a social worker, I feel, that's what I'm supposed to do. And we're here always to help one another on whatever the situation is, be it economic problems, be it jobless communities, be it the environment that we all live in and will have to live in because we don't have another one. I don't know if there's one stashed somewhere else. So that we have to make sure that where we live and where we have to grow and our families have to be, we need to make that environment possible for us to be able to do that. Because we are all products of whatever environment we're in. We're the product of that. So in order for us to keep it, we have to do things, come together and do things that we maintain.
I'd also like to recognize our big guest that we have in the room, President Sadie Harper Scott from Lafayette NAACP. So thank you for joining us. Okay, Rita, if you please share, what do you think we should do to get the change in our community?
Well, several things. I think we first need to acknowledge the capitalistic society that we live in and utilize resources that are available for our situation. There are neighborhood development boards. King Park is one of them. Mapleton Fall Creek is another one. They're situated in areas of town. I'm sure there's one for the west side, one for the north side. To go to these offices and express your concerns with the board because it's a development board. They have committees, they have initiatives, and therefore our community. So to contact them and let your issues and concerns be known. Get an in-depth understanding of the political system that we live in. Become unified in your community organization or organization on a particular issue. And then work that issue, work that your legislator, your politician, your neighborhood development board. One thing with regard to the environment and climate change, this all relates. Environmental degradation perpetuates already existing social and economic injustices. So once you acknowledge that, the environment, climate change, what happened in Katrina, you have climate change, the hurricane in Katrina. Well, it affected a certain marginalized group of people. The Hurricane Sandy in New York, it affected a certain marginalized group of people. In New Orleans, it was a night. That area of town is primarily low to no income. And the same thing for Metropolis, New York. You know, it's really interesting to me how environment and climate, it's like a domino effect. You know, hurricane happens, it affects people, people die, people are displaced, people couldn't afford to leave New Orleans, you know, and so they were stuck there, and those are marginalized people. So if we realize that, and as marginalized people doesn't mean that, what that means is that the powers that be look at you in a certain position and they don't see you, put it simply. So is to make your voice known, to make them see you, utilize resources that are available to you. Get your community together and make your own resources. So that would be my answer to that.
I would say how communities can solve some of the social issues is community development. That means that it should be community-led, community-owned, community invested. The resources that are within that community that have been brought out of that community should be able to sustain those communities. I also think that empowerment, creating opportunity, access to skill development, access to education, but not just, and when we talk about education, I'm not talking about education where you send your kids to school, they do some paperwork, they regurgitate information, and they come home, and we tell you the same information that the teacher told them. I'm talking about an education where it's relative to their experience. Math should be done in real, applicable life experience.
Right.
history should be relative, and it should look like that. Let's be honest. History should look like that. Science should be relative to the ongoing crisis that we face. Renewable energy, we need to biomass, solar, wind, hydroelectric, I'm talking about educating them on fundamentally sound things that they can contribute to their community. And also, community must be able to define their culture. The youth within that culture are able to do that. Here, look at NuMedia, we have some of our youth here. It needs to be youth-led, creating opportunities, showing the youth this is how you become an entrepreneur, this is how you create business, this is how you create industry. This is how you take the idea of capitalism, but this is how you benefit it, not just for you, but for your overall community. When I think about environment, everyone should have a right to decent housing, affordable housing, healthy lifestyle, healthy food options. And also, environment is also mental, physical, spiritual, social, and cultural. All of that is tied to the climate. When I think about climate, we're not just talking about air pollution, I'm talking about the interfacing with law enforcement, the interfacing with other politicians, the interfacing with your parent. How do I talk to this teacher? Then the teacher, how do you connect with this parent? You know, when we talk about things like that, climate change has a lot, it's more holistic, and the big picture there is there for us to recreate ourselves. We have to define where we move forward. Einstein had the saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that the same thinking we use today cannot be the same thinking that we use tomorrow. And that speaks loud that we always are going to have to be innovative. This ingenuity to create opportunities, because the answer is not a silver bullet. I mean, there's no gospel out there, but there's resources and tools that we can continually hone in and sharpen in on and focus on to really get us into a more progressive way where we're starting to talk about alternative forms of energy, progressive forms of education. And then we interface and dialogue. And then I also think there needs to be an intergenerational connection between the youth and the elders of the community. There's a lot of history that we miss.
Yes.
You know, a lot of the youth face some of the problems because they don't understand those problems already exist. Police are not out here harassing you today because you know there's been a history of that. If you can walk them down that history and show them, but there have been alternatives to this history. If they're not informed by that, then this is the reason why we're in the crisis today. Because some people in our community refuse to acknowledge and sweep a lot of these issues underneath the rug. Point blank, we need to explain to our kids. A lot of us just don't have the luxury of just walking down the street and just saying, oh, this is what I plan to do today. Our experiences dictate what we do tomorrow. And that's a reality that our students need to face. Our experiences dictate our reality. So that's what.
Thank you so much. Take a quick commercial break, which is to say, if you could, please, this is all sponsored because of our power campaign, which is Climate Justice Alliance, Communities United for Just Transition. So we really want to thank them for helping us to have this workshop. And so they have, if you could follow them on Twitter at CGA Our Power, and hashtag Our Power Summer and hashtag Just Transitions. And then, of course, we have the NAACP Instagram, Facebook. And again, we want to thank the KI NuMedia and attorney Brian Bullock for speaking with us today, and all of our panelists. And of course, the NAACP. And then we are live streaming.
Yeah, so I'm Alan, I'm part of the KI NuMedia team. And we, Johnny, I'm gonna introduce you. This is Johnny.
Hello.
So Johnny, what have you been doing today?
Lately I've just been working with the camera, setting up, getting good shots of the panel and everyone talking, the videos and everything. Kind of working with what I've got right now.
Yeah, so Johnny's one of our youth interns. KI NuMedia is an intergenerational group of people who've been professionally trained in graphic design, website design, as well as youth who are learning skills in videography, web work, coding, etc. So Johnny today was doing a live stream, which we broadcast to the internet, to the world. So the video will be available on the panel afterwards.
So if you're interested, we'll get that to you so that you can get it out to everyone else. And again, I'm gonna pass these cards around right now. We're doing a promotion. So 50% off websites, graphic design, live streaming events, video work, Dia is over here on video camera, and Laura is also helping out with her video work. So if you're interested, you can pass it around.
Also, you can join us for our Indiana Journey for Justice. We'll be getting together, I think, around 2:30-ish or so to march to the Julia Carson building. And again, we're commemorating the 10-year anniversary, 10 years since Hurricane Katrina, and we're part of the quilt patching. This one came from, I believe it's Minnesota, and the other one has come from Chicago. And ideally, we will have an Indiana quilt patch that will join these, and it will go to St. Louis and then make its way to Gulfport, Mississippi, where it'll be sewn together into one big quilt, and then a major commemoration in New Orleans, of which I will be a delegate. So I want to encourage you again to put messages in the hope capsule, giving hope to the survivors of Katrina. Whenever you feel the mood, you can go or write a message and put it in the red file. Okay, thank you. And next, with no further ado, if we could have Attorney Brian Bullock give us a summary and then some more, if you'd like, on what our next steps should be in this journey that we're on.
Number one, I want to thank you for inviting me out today. All of the panelists did a great job. Give them some round of applause. I'm not sure how much I can really add to what's been said already, but I will try. I'll begin by explaining how I became involved politically as well as in my community. I've always been a person that wanted to do things, but for a great portion of my life, I was a person that simply wanted to do things and never did. So, like a lot of people in this room, it took me a while to kind of get myself activated. At the ripe old age of, I think, like 32, I started thinking about my legacy, right? What my legacy being like at 32. And so, realizing my mortality at such an early age focused me. It made me realize that all the things that I wanted to do and wanted to accomplish, I needed to start doing those things right then and there. And so one of the very first things that I did while I was in law school, I created a scholarship fund for African-American law students at Valparaiso School of Law. Once I graduated from law school, I made a choice to work for Indiana Legal Services, which is a not-for-profit law firm that represents the indigent in the state. And I did that for a number of years. Around the same time, actually, I was a member of the NAACP, so I joined the Gary branch, and I jumped in feet first. And so I was the labor and industry chairman for the Gary branch for a long time. And then I also started a environmental justice ad hoc committee of that branch. When I was with the labor and industry committee, historically what that committee did was they would investigate charges of discrimination. So there was a period of time in our history where we didn't have an EEOC, right? For most of our history, we didn't have that. For most of our history, we didn't have laws that made it illegal to discriminate against people based upon their race and gender and so on and so forth. So the NAACP was the game in town. People would go to the NAACP and say, I've been fired, I've been treated wrongly on my job, can you help out? Right, and that's the history of the NAACP. So when I assumed that role, again, I jumped in feet first and tried to do the very best that I could do in that role. And one of the things that I did, besides investigate complaints of discrimination on my own time, was we would get job descriptions in. I didn't understand why we were receiving job descriptions. And what I came to realize is that for a lot of employers that had been sued for racial discrimination, what they would do to show that they were reaching out to minority people is they would send these job postings to the NAACP. That way they can go back and tell the court or the federal government, we're doing our part, look, we're looking for the Negroes, right? We send them these applications. And so what I did was I said, well, this is interesting. So a lot of people in Gary would come to the Gary branch asking if we knew about job opportunities. So I put those two things together. So people would come to the branch, I would take their application, I would personally write a letter to the company that sent us the job description. I would say, since you're looking for an applicant, please consider this person. I did that for a number of years, and as you might imagine, wasn't very successful because those employers weren't serious. But I took the step to try to find those people work with the job postings that we received at the branch. I also created a newsletter for the Gary branch during my time with them. And around the same time, I got involved with the Environmental Justice Partnership. The partnership was a coalition of community groups such as the local Sierra Club. I became involved with the NAACP. There were some community members, I think certain members from the city of Gary's environmental department were part of the coalition as well. One of the first issues that we tried to tackle was the siting of the confined disposal facility in East Chicago, where they were placing the CDF right next to the high school. Excuse me. And the CDF was going to displace, they were dredging the Little Calumet River. And so what they were going to do was to take the sludge from the Little Calumet River and put it inside of the CDF. We didn't have a problem with dredging the Little Calumet River because it needed to be dredged. The problem was that we were putting the CDF right next to a high school. And they were going to leave the top open. If you know anything about PCPs and these other dangerous particles, they don't just stay down. When they're exposed to air, they rise. Right? And so we became engaged, so shall we say, with the Army Corps of Engineers. And they wanted to stick with their plan of keeping the CDF open at the top. So we made two demands initially. One, we don't want it where it is. Two, if you're going to put it there, at least cover the top. And I want to kind of combine some of these thoughts that I had as I tell this story. So one of the things that I tell people in community groups is when you make demands of institutions and people in power, the first thing you want to realize is that the reason that you have to make a demand is because they don't want to do what you want them to do. They're okay with things being the way that they are. That's why you have to make demands. Right? So if you go into these meetings with people in power thinking that you can just convince them because it's the right thing to do, then you're wrong, right? If they wanted to do the right thing, they would just do it, right? So the reason you have to push these people is because they're going to do things the way that they want them done. So we weren't able to convince them to move the CDF, but because we kept pressure on the Army Corps of Engineers, we put on several conferences. We organized a march in East Chicago. We got the community behind us. We got a few politicians behind us. We were at least able to make them meet our second demand, which was to cap the top of the CDF. Right? And so you have to take your victories where you can. The next thing that we got involved with from the Environmental Justice Partnership standpoint was we were engaged with the Northern Indiana Regional Planning Commission. Like most cities, that's our NPR, Metropolitan Planning Organization. They conduct planning analysis as to where new roads should be built, where new sewer lines should go. They forecast out where new communities will go. And we noticed that our NPO, we call it NERC for short, we realized that they were making all of their forecasting and their planning, moving resources further away from what we call the urban core being Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago. So they were promoting development outward to the suburbs, to Crown Point, Maryville, these other communities that were further away. Now what that does is, number one, it drains resources, human resources, number one, because people are going to go where the better homes are, and the more affordable homes, and the shopping centers, and the entertainment, right? So that's one of the side effects of white flight that we don't think about, is that when that population moves away from the urban core, they take resources with them, right? And so we said we have to get involved with that and find some way to address that. So I think around that time, the concept of environmental justice was really hitting home. And NAACP was, I don't want to say they were afraid of us, but they took our demands very seriously. So we were part of their planning process from start to finish, and we got them to incorporate EJ principles throughout the entire planning process for the 2030 plan. And as I understand, I haven't been involved with it since that point, but that was one of the most progressive plans that NAACP had ever adopted. And I've done a few of the things, but I want to get to the summary if I can. So the panelists hit on, again, pretty much everything that I was going to say. They kind of stole my thunder. We talk about capitalism and the intersection between politics and money. We have to understand that this country was founded on an economic venture. We have to understand that our very presence as African Americans in this country was a capitalist venture. Slavery was a business. Slavery was profitable, not only for the slave traders, but for those northern communities that were getting rich off building slave boats, insuring slave boats, insuring the lives of slaves. So you have entire industries, insurance, banking, shipbuilding, that grew up around the issue of slavery, to support slavery. Right? So all of this has always been interconnected. This is not a new phenomenon. And again, with a particular election, that's always been part of the game. We must understand it from that perspective. And that's really important because too many of us have bought into this myth that the country was founded on freedom. Right? Mm-hmm. If you believe that, the first question you must ask yourself is, freedom for who? It certainly wasn't founded on the freedom of African Americans. It certainly wasn't founded on the freedom of the Native population. In fact, it wasn't founded on the freedom of women of whatever color. Right? So that myth has been with us for a long time, and a lot of us have bought into that. And we act as if this is true. And if we simply cite the Constitution as the source of our morality, that will change things. When the Constitution itself, the founding of the country itself, was built on the institution, one, of genocide of the Native population, and two, of the genocide / enslavement of the African population. When we talk about Katrina really shows what can happen to any poor Black community. So what we saw in Katrina was the Black and poor were not able to get away when the deluge came, right? When the levees broke. That's the real story. I'm not even sure so much if it's climate change or not, to be frank. To me, the real issue is when climate change becomes more intense, the real problem is who will be able to guard against it? Will our communities be able to deal with climate change? Are our state governments preparing our communities for climate change? It's not so much that it's going to occur, we accept that. We're done with that. The next question is, who's looking out for us when it happens? And New Orleans is the cautionary tale, because that community simply couldn't get away, and that's the bottom line. And that's what we have to take from that. Are we going to be able to deal with climate change in our community? We already are inundated with toxic waste sites and landfills and other problems. We already have chronic underemployment and unemployment. We already have all the other ills of white flight and joblessness, all these other high crime. We have that already. Climate change is simply going to exacerbate that. Climate change is going to make that worse for us. One of my intellectual mentors is Malcolm X. And he always made the linkage between what's happening in America to what's happening abroad. He said, you can't understand what's happening in the Congo unless you understand what's happening in Mississippi. And you can't understand what's happening in Mississippi unless you understand what's happening in Congo. Because he understood that what's happening to Black people here is happening to Black people in other parts of the world. We have to be able to make those things. And so, as climate change gets worse for the globe, poor Black and brown countries are not going to be prepared either, because they're dealing with their own issues internally from centuries of colonization and imperialism and structural adjustments where the IMF makes these loans to poor nations at rates that they know they can't pay them back, and in exchange they want something from those nations. Since you can't pay this loan back, then we need to take control of your waterways, right? So we need to understand that the same things that we're facing right here in our communities are the same things that people are facing all around the globe, in particular, again, in Africa and Latin America, where they were colonized and they've been, I'm gonna say misused, it's too wide of a word, but they're dealing with the effects of colonization to this day. If you also look at New Orleans today, what you see is that New Orleans is a very different city. A large percentage of the Black population is gone there. And you have, it's gentrification on steroids. Right? So you have Starbucks and all these nice places to eat and drink that weren't there before, because the people who lived there before couldn't afford the places that exist there now. You have, I think there might be one public school left in New Orleans. Right? Almost all of their schools are charter schools. That was an effect because people who would have fought against that are gone. Right? So the population left, and those who had plans for New Orleans all the time saw an opportunity. Disasters are profitable. What Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism, right? We can't let a disaster go to waste. Let's see if we can profit off of this disaster. And that's what happened to New Orleans. And we have to understand it from that perspective, and we have to understand it happened to Gary. It's happening right now in Detroit, right, where the emergency manager that people did not elect is running the city, where people are fighting just to get water. We have to understand that all these things are interconnected. Right? One of the great things that has arisen over the last couple of years, of course, is the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think, from my perspective, one of the things that makes it so great is that it's led by young people, right? And they don't care if anybody thinks about their tactics, and they should. They don't care about what you think about their demands, and they should. And they're showing that young people, one, care. They care about their communities. They care about their peers. They care about their future. And two, it shows that they have the wherewithal to come together and make demands on the system. And from my perspective, they're doing it the right way by being uncompromising, by being in people's face. That's how that change is going to come. We have to get away from this politics of respectability, right? And so if you look at what happened in Ferguson, you had a lot of people saying, well, Mike Brown was a thug. But the people there said two things. One, we don't care about that. He was one of ours. And two, it didn't matter whether he was a thug or not. The same thing would happen. All right? Because I hear people saying all the time, you know, they want laws passed to pull your pants up, and they talk about people, you know, getting what they deserve, and people should talk to the police right and things like that. It doesn't matter. Right? The police aren't asking you if you're a thug or not before they beat you or shoot you. Nobody asked for Marlon Graham in New York if he was a thug or not, when they broke into his home and shot him in front of his grandmother. Right? It doesn't matter. We're all in the same boat together, and we need to understand that. Right? So that's what's good about the Black Lives Matter movement. I'd like to see the people on this panel and maybe the Black Lives Matter movement engage in some militant environmentalism, right? Where we chain ourselves to the courthouse, the state house or something like that, where we get to the streets and make serious demands of this system from an environmental perspective. We live in a state where the governor and the so-called environmental management agency doesn't even believe in climate change. You're not going to change their minds by talking nice to them. You're going to have to convince them in the way that people-led movements do, from the bottom up, which is we make serious demands and we make the system, we put tension on the system. That's what Dr. King was talking about. You have to place tension on the system. We have to make the system respond to our demands. They don't respond by speeches. They don't respond by talking nice. They don't respond by talking in the language of morality. They respond when they see people who are uncompromised, who won't give up, who come back the next week, who come back the next month, and the month after that. And when those crowds get bigger and bigger, that's what they respond to. Because of that intersection between capitalism and politics, we don't have the capital. Maybe you, I don't have the capital, right? We don't have the capital as everyday citizens. So what we have is our unity. What we have is our ability to force the system to respond to us and our demands. And that only comes through collective action. We definitely need an environmental justice statute in the state, right? It's appalling that, number one, item, the Indian Department of Environmental Management doesn't have a real environmental justice policy. It's even more appalling that the state does not have an EJ statute. We need a statute, a law, that says that whenever a new power plant or whatever is built, or whenever there's planning, economic planning, that the needs of the poor and disenfranchised and minority communities, their needs are considered, and the plan should reflect that consideration. Right now, Connecticut has an EJ statute, California has an EJ statute. There's not even a discussion to have an EJ statute in the state. One of the other things that we have to realize is that these people in this state across the country, they're not playing with us. They're very serious. Power is being consolidated all throughout this globe, not just this country. If you look at what's happening here, where we have the consolidation of the banking industry, insurance as well. Under the Clinton administration, we had media consolidation. So everything that you read and hear on the radio and watch on television is controlled by about 6 or 7 companies. Right? So they can simply recycle information to you through all of your senses. They can say one thing on television, say the same thing to you in the newspaper, say the same thing to you on the radio. They control everything that you consume, all the media that you consume. 7 companies, right? Which gets me back to what I said earlier. We have to consolidate our forces as well. They're not joking. They're not playing with us. You look at what happened in this state with the voter ID laws, one of the first states to adopt the voter ID law. Here's the real purpose of a voter ID law: is to skim off as many people as possible from being able to vote. Plain and simple. That's all it is. They do forecasts. They know they can predict who's going to come out and vote in elections in advance. So all this is a way to skim off some more of those people and have fewer people being able to vote. And we have to be able to see through that. The so-called right to work laws. All that's doing is forcing the breakup of unions so they can't collectively bargain for their members. One of the side issues with the charter schools is it also breaks up unions, the teachers unions. Right? So the moment that a school is charterized, that school no longer has a bargaining unit. It's run by a profit, not the profit. So they can choose the teachers there can try to form a union there, but the minute it's charterized, that union is gone. I want to say this. One of the reasons why we have problems with charters, one of the reasons why we have many of the problems that we have in our community, from state charters for a second, is really because of what the brother said earlier, is that there's been that disconnect in the history, right? So a lot of you guys fought these battles many, many years ago. And one, you probably thought the battle was won. But two, you didn't instill in the younger generation, look, this is what you have to do. You have to remain vigilant. When you see this happening, you need to understand what that is, right? There wasn't that transfer of knowledge. And so people in my generation, probably a little bit younger, grew up thinking, one, it's kind of always been this way. And or two, that you don't have to fight major battles. That if, again, you simply make nice demands of the system will respond. Right? We didn't get that you get to be in the trenches. That's kind of why we are where we are. When you look at charter schools, one, the rhetoric was beautiful, right? Failing schools, right? We didn't understand that that's political language. There's no legal definition of a failing school. It doesn't exist. It's politics. It's political language. But it's beautiful, right? The right is good at that kind of stuff. Right to life. Who's against life, right? You can't be against life unless you understand what the political motivation behind that is. Right? And so with the charters, what we found, what really happened is that not only was those forces thinking years in advance, which they do, which we have to do as well, but they took advantage of the fact that people, one, that all parents want their children educated properly. Right? So it's preying off the desires of people to have good education for the kids. But one of the big problems in the community is that people weren't going to school board meetings, people weren't going to PTA meetings. There was no civic engagement. That's kind of the problem. The minute we left the streets and said it's okay, nature abhors a vacuum. You heard that phrase before? Nature abhors a vacuum. Something will fill that vacuum. And what has filled that vacuum is the ideology and the policies of the right wing. And when I say the right wing, I don't just mean the Republicans, but they're right wing Democrats too. Right? And as a matter of fact, the Democratic Party is complicit in all of this. When we talk about global climate change, the president has been pushing this TPP, this Trans-Pacific Partnership. This TPP has been negotiated in secrecy, right? So if you are on the Foreign Relations Committee, whatever it's called, you're on the committee, if you're a senator, you can go into a room and read portions of it, but you can't take it notes, and you can't talk about it. President Obama has been pushing this TPP. When we talk about climate change and how that will affect our communities, one of the major provisions of this TPP is that corporations will have the right to go into another country and say, no, your laws, your environmental laws are a barrier to our access to trade. We can't enter that market or be profitable in that market because of that regulation, because of that law. And then that dispute between that private corporation and that country, let's just say the US, goes to a mediator, tribunal. But it's more corporate entities. It's not a court. It's not a judge. And they will decide what should happen in that circumstance. Either that country will have to do something about that regulation or pay that corporation. Right? That's the TPP that your president is pushing. Right? So we have to understand how all of this stuff is interrelated. We have to understand the connectedness between these things. We can't get caught up in Democrats and Republicans. We can't get caught up. It's the first black president. Who cares? He works for the empire. That's his job. That's his job. His job is to maintain the empire, plain and simple. His job is to maintain the status quo. And if you understand politics from that very basic nature, you don't get it. I remember hearing H. Rap Brown. Right? Oh, that's going way back, right? Most of you don't, right? But he gave speech in the late 60s, early 70s, making this very point. That it won't matter if you get a black president, he said, he will still be a slave to capitalism and to imperialism. And he will have, even if he had good intentions, he will have to subordinate those intentions to capital and to the empire. This is late 1960s, early 70s. These are lessons that we should learn or remember when we saw this image of this young charismatic black man, the presidency. Environmental justice, now, environmental justice, the main phrase in environmental justice regulations talks about benefits and burdens. Benefits and burdens, right? So wealthier communities benefit from our environmental regulations and the way that things are. Poor communities typically are burdened by environmental degradation. Climate change, environmental racism, we have to always think about it in that perspective as well. Benefits, burdens. Are these regulations that are on the books benefiting our community? We already know what the burdens are. When we talk to politicians, you have to ask them, what are you going to do to lessen these burdens? What are you going to do? Is your piece of legislation going to offer benefits to our community? Benefits and burdens. When we think about climate justice, look at what's happening in Africa and other poor nations. Benefits and burdens. Because the main thing we need to understand is that climate change is not going to affect everybody the same way. It's going to affect us unequally. We are unequal now. Climate change will affect us in an unequal way. That's the thing we need to take home from this, right? So again, all the problems that we have are simply going to be exacerbated as things get worse. The one governmental entity that is taking climate change seriously is the Pentagon. The Pentagon's job is to wage war. They have to take it seriously. That's going to affect how they do their thing. But they're also looking at the fact that as climate change gets worse, as food shortages get worse, as people become more insecure, as droughts increase, people become more desperate. And what are they going to start doing? They're going to start rioting. They're going to start making even more demands of the system. Demands that, again, the people in power already don't want to make to concede. That's why they're taking climate change seriously. They understand that as things get worse, people will become more desperate. People will start moving from countries that they were born in, which is already happening. Right? We see people from Ethiopia and other parts of Africa going across the globe, going to Israel. That puts strain on those economies in those places. Right? That's all we have. The thing for us to do is to work collectively, think collectively, and think ahead, and figure out ways in which we can combat against this using, again, the most important power that we have, which is the power.
Thank you, everyone. For those that are inclined, we want to do a quick photo op with these masks saying that we can't breathe. And then we'll have KI take our picture on that. And it's also kind of a push for the Clean Power Plan so that our communities can breathe. Then after that, if you want to partake in some cake, which one side has Hurricane Katrina and the other side has IPL or not. And please put a message in for the survivors of Katrina. Thank you for joining us. If you can all, my panelists, and again, thank my panelists for their great contribution. everyone just kind of go where the panelists are. And if you want to be in, I want the panelists in the front for sure. And if you want to be in the back, so you all come more closer to the front. Park, stand next to Brian there. Press your back. And you hold the sign. Everyone have their mask. All right. And hopefully, KI, you can get that whole visual, I hope. And we'll tweet that, or I'll give you some kind of a message for the governor that we can't breathe past it, or give us the clean power plan or something. Okay. And okay, everybody have a mask, so you can come up here too.
You scoot in over there. There we go. 1, 2, 3. 3.
Okay.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's such a waste of, not very sustainable, but. You can keep them or throw them away. That's about as militant as I'm gonna get for today. Thank you all for joining us. Please get some cake. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I got napkins. Whoa.
What does that do for us?